I think we're live. So hold on a second. All right. Yeah, we're live. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on our premiere episode of Lunch Break, where we talk with creatives who have been involved in films that we have distributed. And today with us, we have costume designer Aubrey Laufer, who did Lucky Grandma.
Hi, Eric.
Hey.
Hi, everyone.
How's it going? How are you? Where are you at right now?
So actually, when everything happened with lockdown, I was working on something in Toronto. And so everything shut down and I just stayed here.
Oh, so you're in Toronto.
So I'm in Toronto, actually. Just
oh, great.
And I'm coming back to New York August 1st.
How do you feel about that?
It'll be good to come home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this a place that they put you up in while you were working on the job?
Yeah, they have a place for us to stay when we're working. And the network was really supportive to all of us and just wanted us to be safe. So they were okay with us staying as long as we needed to stay.
Is this a project that you can name, or is it something secret that you're working on?
The one that I was assistant designer for this project, and it's called Why the Last Man. And I was assisting Olga Mill. So, and now it's shut down at the moment, so I don't know.
Is this a TV show or was it a movie?
It's a TV show for FX.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. You've been working on a lot of TV, but can you just kind of go back and tell us how you got into the industry, how you got started?
Yeah. So I mean, I actually studied costume design and was always a theater kid. Eventually, when I went to college, I studied theater design. And then slowly over time, started to focus on costume design. And so really that's how it all started for me, was as early as school.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, you know, once you're finished school, I think everyone has their own story about how they start to actually work.
Right.
For me, it was more just getting that first job and then continuing to work and take opportunities whenever I could get them and keep going with it. So New York had been a really good place for that. There was so much.
Where'd you go to school?
So I went to school for costume design at California Institute of the Arts.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I mean, I'll eat a little bit of my food too. So we're doing.
Yeah, it's like we're having lunch at a restaurant that does
super cash
right now. Yeah. Are you from California or from New York?
So I'm actually from Toronto.
Got it.
But it was all very random. You know, there's also a lot of work happening in Toronto. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I get lucky and I'm able to come here and have time here if I get a job here, you know? Yeah. So usually those jobs last, 3 or 4 months. And if you're lucky, you can come to, I mean, obviously Toronto is a great city, and then I have a lot of family and friends here, but this is where I'm from originally.
Did you start working in LA? Was that where you got your first job out of school?
I started working in New York. Yeah, like I started building a career in this in New York. And in New York, that, I don't know what will happen in the future. Obviously, the industry is always shifting as we go through time. Mm-hmm. When I was first working in New York, and even up until the lockdown that just happened, there was a lot of opportunity for people to be a production assistant in the costume department, because it's not a union position. So it's an entry-level position that you don't have to be in the union to start doing production assistant work. Mm-hmm. And That's where I started. To like being a production assistant on a variety of jobs, and then within our department, you can move up slowly within the department. There's different ways that you can move up and hopefully eventually get to a assistant design position where you learn a lot as well.
Yeah. That was my first job out of film school. Is I was production assistant on that show iCarly at Nickelodeon.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
It's the best place to start. I actually tell people not even go to film school. I was like, just go find someone you like, ask if you can work for them. Maybe you'll get paid, and then just get into it, because it's kind of, I mean, film school will teach you.
I studied theater, so then when you're working in film and television, you realize that there's a whole other way of working that's separate from what you learned in theater school. And so you start a new education when you actually start to work as a production assistant.
Right. In that specific television. And
Exactly.
Have you worked in theater before, or did you go just right into television film?
I'd had some work in theater, and it was just very different.
Yeah. Do you like working in one or the other more?
In the I don't know that I prefer one or the other, but I think obviously most of my career has been in film and television, and I've loved that experience. So I'd say I don't want to play favorites.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of experience working in film and TV, and that has been really great for me.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite part of your job that you like the most?
Yeah, I think with costume design, the thing that's the most fun for me is cracking the case and figuring out how we're going to find these different characters that we need to create, and we need to help to tell the story. So you're really pulling from all of your knowledge bases and reference points to understand who is this person, or what is this supposed to look like, and you have to research it and understand it and communicate that within your department. And I think that kind of back and forth of figuring that out is really satisfying. It's really fun to do that part of the storytelling, to get it right.
Yeah, I mean, that much care and attention to detail, I think, benefits the on-screen personality of just the tone of the film or TV show that you're watching. But I think it also is so important for the actors to be put into something where they feel like they can come to life in what they're wearing.
Yeah, I think so. That I think exactly. You're sort of balancing the creative you're discussing with the creative team to try to make the world and do your part to help create the world. And then at the same time, you also have to really have this empathy and compassion for the actors and make sure that it's good for their character, that they can work with it, and that it's going to help them. And then also on top of that, you also have to be considerate of the producers and make sure that you're doing all of this on a budget and in the right timeline. So you're really wearing a lot of hats and trying to make sure that everyone's taken care of. And so I think, yeah, it's really satisfying when you can get it, when you succeed and you have an actor who's really comfortable and satisfied and feels in their character. And then creatively, it's visually coming together and it looks the way that you want. And if you are able to stay on budget, then you're really killing it.
Yeah. Then everyone loves you.
And yeah,
you're everyone's favorite person.
Of course, it works out perfectly every time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lucky Grandma had such a unique feel with the costume design and the backdrop of the city. Tell us a little bit about your history maybe with Stacey, whether you have worked together or not, or how you met, and kind of how you began the process of doing all these things that we were just talking about for Lucky Grandma.
So currently on the job that I was working on, I was assisting Olga Mill, and she's an incredible costume designer that if I ever get the chance to work with, I'm always so lucky to have that opportunity. And I had assisted her before on a film called First Reformed. So we had worked together, and that was a great that was a great experience working on that film. And so she knew Stacey, and I don't fully understand how they know each other, but she just recommended that I interview for. I think Olga just caught wind of the fact that Stacey was looking for a costume designer, and then it connected us. So I interviewed with Stacey, and then so then just me and Stacey started from there, and sort of the whole thing starts with the interview itself is the beginning of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think, Stacey and Angela, and then also just Angela was the co-writer of the film. And then also just it's rare for a costume designer to go on tech scouts or on scouts with mm-hmm. the directors and the director of photography and the production designer. But in this case, because it was such a small film, I went with everyone. And so, a costume designer could do this on their own as well. Just go to Chinatown, to locations that are relevant, and do your research on the ground. But so we were all there together. So we just had the advantage of looking at it together, being really informed by what we were seeing. And I think for me, part of what we talked about earlier of balancing the needs of the actor, the creative team, I was constantly so aware and trying to be in tune with Stacey and Angela and Tsai and just make sure that we were making the choices that were right and that felt true. And I have to give so much credit to Stacey, because she was so, of course, she had such a clear vision and understanding, and it wasn't just about getting the look right to make it feel like what it should, to get the Chinatown feeling that we wanted, but also her attention to color and texture, and having the whole frame be what she wanted it to be, because she's very visual. So everything, we were communicating so much in order to make
sure. Be walking through the streets, and she would just be like, that color, that flag, and you're taking note of it all.
Well, like I said, I had told you guys when we spoke another time that we did, in early stages of putting this together, we sat and talked about color, for example, for hours. And actually Stacey came up with a palette for the film, and sort of had a palette in mind. So she wasn't being random, and she really thought about what she wanted it to look like and what the colors were going to be. And then I can't speak to how she perceived every single frame, but I just know that nothing made it onto the screen that wasn't intentional, and that didn't feel like it worked with her overall vision for the film.
Yeah, it feels that way when you're watching.
I'm so glad.
Very aesthetically pleasing, and I know she'd probably be really happy to hear this. It's very aesthetically pleasing to watch. Some of my favorite movies are Wes Anderson films, because it's just all the story is great. It's also great in Lucky Grandma, but when you're watching it.
Yeah, actually, what I found as the costume designer, and I'd experienced this before working with Olga on First Reform, sometimes when there are rules that you have to follow, and you have to stick to a palette, and you have to keep be mindful of certain ways that you're trying to maintain the world, it becomes kind of fun, because it's a different challenge that you have to rise to, that you're maintaining this look, and you're maintaining the color. And it became kind of fun to be a bit dogmatic about the palette.
Yeah, I think the one thing I took away from film school, the only thing, was learn the rules so you know how to break them. So if you're given the set of rules, you know what you're working within, then you can get creative. And that was kind of how I've always interpreted. This is how it's supposed to be done. But
right.
how far can we push the limit on what's being, you know, what's being presented in front of us. So
yeah,
maybe that's how I was interpreting what you were saying. Like you were given this, and then
right. Well, for me, yeah, and I like enjoyed sticking to some of the rules that we created. It just makes sort of the creative result almost, to me, more the way that you describe watching it and noticing how intentional it feels. And I'm so glad that that's the way that it's perceived, because it just makes it feel really resolved. The work feels resolved and really coherent. So I think that you know it's hard work to get it that way, to make sure every frame is adhering to that. So it's just satisfying in a way to have those rules, and when that's the creative direction, and then go for it.
How early on did you start your sketches? Because you shared some of those with us, and we shared them with our socials. But
totally.
What stage do you begin those?
Well, in this case, I think it's different for different projects, and oftentimes in film and television, you wouldn't even need to do a sketch, depending on what the project is. In this case, with just in the creative conversation with Stacey, we were trying to figure out what grandma. So much it's about grandma so much, and we were really trying to spike down, like, who do we think grandma is? What's her silhouette? And we were looking at all of the places, as we talked about. There were so many different research points that we were touching base with. And then, you can pull out so many visual references and do mood boards, and to give an idea to the director of what you have in mind. And then at a certain point, it's also helpful to create a sketch, because if you take that opportunity to just draw something that like some ideas you're having, it adds to the conversation. So really those sketches were more like prototypes, and it was like we used them as a tool to get more specific when we were trying to pin the character down, so that Stacey could look at those, and then we could continue the conversation from there and get even more refined with it. So that was early. That was just pre-production, Stacey and me having creative conversations, and then using the sketches as a tool to just deepen the conversation.
Yeah. Was there any wardrobe that you manufactured yourself, or was most of it found, bought, borrowed?
Was there anything on this one? On this one, I didn't have to build anything. Yeah, this was all found and sourced and put together.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Did Tsai get to keep any of it? Did she fall in love with anything, and you were like, just keep it?
I think I don't know that she kept anything. She might have kept one of her hero jackets, because that was one of the things in real life that she was like, oh, I would fully wear this. Cool. Like the puffer, I think she would wear as a practical thing. So she probably kept one of those.
So you're also Tsai Chin stylist.
I wish I
streetwear stylist.
I wish I could be her full-time stylist somehow, but
I'll send her this video and let her know.
Yeah, I should reach out to her again and be like, continue this.
On a movie like this, do you start with Tsai's character? Do you start with the lead, define her, and then build out from there?
Yeah, I think you could think of it that way. She certainly was the most important. And I mean, even if you think about how she's in every single shot, so whatever she's wearing, she's even color-wise, if you think about what she's wearing, that's going to affect every other shot in the film and relationship to other characters in that shot. So you do tend to build from that main character and think, okay, well, so she's always wearing a red puffer, essentially. So she gets red. She gets that color, for example. So you have to definitely bear her in mind. and use her as a starting point. But then at the same time, you don't want to neglect anyone else. So I don't think anyone gets neglected, but she is definitely was so important and was a starting point in the process.
Do you use psychology of colors when you're designing and picking out things for characters and scenes?
I think in the way that this is really, it can be part of the challenge of it and also part of the exciting aspect of the job is that it's so collaborative. So it just all depends on the creative direction that's collaboratively decided. And I've worked on projects before as the costume designer where the director, and usually, the director is really leading the charge in these work, in the stuff that I've done so far, and is usually the case. And in that other project that I did, the director really was bearing in mind, this color is an emotional, I'm using color in these parts of the film in order to convey a certain emotional aspect, and that translated into the costumes, and it also translated into the lighting and the set. So I think it just depends on if it comes up with the creative discussion, and occasionally if it's up to us, if it's up to me, or if it's up to our department, then we might use that. We might, or the costume designer who's leading our department will say, I want it to kind of reflect this emotion, and they'll make those choices themselves if it makes sense to them.
It seems like Lucky Grandma was all in all like a perfect crew. Very collaborative from early on. And it's not always the case. Like you were saying, you're not always involved in tech scouts. There is something cool about being there because there are conversations that are happening even early on that you get to be informed on. Yeah.
Well, and it's a small film, it was a small scale production. And typically, I think the thing that people really enjoy about that kind of thing is the sort of the amount of face time you can have, and how you do just kind of come together, and you can really get into the conversations that you like. Even that sitting and talking about color, it just you sort of just taking your time in a way that can change when you're ramping up the scale of production. And you have so many people in a room, and there's so many different, and of course, so that's a whole other entity. But I think it's very nice when you start to have a bit of a small family feeling with a smaller group of people. And I think that Lucky Grandma did end up having that classic indie feeling where everyone was really connected and working really well together.
Yeah. You've been a part of some really awesome shows. Almost all of them I know very well. Rami, Master of None, Crashing, just to name a few. What's the difference between working on a long form television show, big budgets, versus these smaller indie films?
So here I gotta really give it up to the costume designer who I worked with the most over the years is Dana Covarrubias, and she's been this incredible mentor to me, and she's a brilliant person to work with. And I even just listing all of those shows that you just mentioned, really it was her and I worked on those shows together for a long time. All those different, and they're also variable. And so she, I think, first of all, when I've worked on those shows, I've been the assistant designer, so assisting Dana. And I've just learned so much getting to be her assistant in those different, each production had its own challenges and demands that we had to figure out. And so I learned so much in that time. I think compared to it's funny, compared to a smaller thing, certainly there's that obvious piece where you just don't have as much resources. It's just, but it's funny, even when you have more money, for instance, you're always trying to just make it work. Like you're always kind of pushing the bounds of I'm running out of money in order to be able to logistically accomplish this thing. So it's not so different. You just sort of have to shift your sense of scale. So that the experiences I had working on sort of higher budget union things, assisting Dana, I think really prepared me to be able to do this indie work still, because you're still using the same skills. So I don't, I think the indie part, even it's fun, you have this really beautiful experience making this thing with people, and that's really good, but it's certainly harder. It's a harder labor of love because you don't have the same level of support. And I think when you're on those bigger productions, the level of support does make it more, it makes it a little less
intimate, maybe like personable. It just everyone has their roles and they're all running around.
Yeah, I think all of this work is always gonna be hard and good work, but sometimes having a little bit more support when you're on a higher budget thing I'm not gonna say it's not nice, in terms of having more people to help do the work and more budget in order to make it happen. But then at the same time,
like you said, you're always pushing that. So if you have more, you're going to be pushing with more, but maybe you have 3 people down the line that can go do something for you, as opposed to none, nobody, and you're running and doing everything.
The lessons that you learn, I'd say either way, if you started in a smaller indie and then you move into the bigger scale, or you start in the bigger scale and then you kind of go down to do something indie. And I don't mean to say like up or down, it's just different scales of the means of production. You're still applying the same logistical knowledge and you're trying to do what we talked about at the beginning, what's the creative, how do I make sure the actors feel good and like they're okay, and then also how do I work with the producers and make sure that their needs are met too. And then also within your own department, it's like, how's my department? What do we need? Is everyone taken care of within my department? So it's like all this, it's being the costume designer is really like you're looking all around and you're trying to make sure all of these people are okay, and you have to pull that together. And so I think that exists no matter what, if you're working on a Netflix show or you're working on a independent feature, if you're just dealing with all of those different entities, and it's up to you to make it come together.
It's creativity, leadership, therapy, being everyone's therapist, and it's like
including
making movies is crazy.
Your own therapist.
You have to be your own therapist. Productions are just like going to battle with a group of people, and you hope for the best. You hope it goes well,
and then you end up producing this really amazing thing and have this result that's this creative, beautiful thing that goes out in the world. So
on that note, you were featured in Vogue.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome.
How did that come about? How does that feel to be
that came about so organically. It was just a response to the Grandma movie, and it was great to be able to talk about it with Vogue. I don't know how to put it into words. It was really surreal, and it felt great to. I think even just for the movie itself, for the film itself, to be featured in Vogue is really, I think it's great because, like I said, when I spoke to Brooke from Vogue, originally when I first got the opportunity to work on this, I was like, this is so cool that we're going to tell a story about an 80-year-old woman. That in and of itself just seemed really special because it's not typical. It's not the norm. And usually things are about young people. There's a lot of things, and all of this is important work, and it's about young people, and everything's good. I'm not saying it's not good, but you just don't see that represented. And the reason that they got to make this film is because it was an untold story. So I think for it to get the attention in the aftermath, even to be in vogue and be appreciated for its style, and to kind of celebrate Tsai in taking on that role and embodying this character, like what she did so incredibly. And you know she's actually 84, or she's
that's crazy. I mean, it's just she doesn't even look 84, but like the movie is, there's so much action and moving. It's like she's constantly doing something physical in this movie.
So it's really, you know, she's so inspiring, and I think she was really well cast, of course. Yeah. And then to have that kind of extend into Vogue, I think is really satisfying. And I think that it should be celebrated and it should be a part of fashion. And it is, you know? So
it is. This whole movie is just fashion in so many ways. Like it's pushing, like fashion pushes limits, right? Like this movie, you're right, is unique. We're not telling this story very often. So it's cool that Stacey and Angela did this movie, and you put your stamp on it.
Everywhere, you know, like you can find it in all places. So, and I felt that when doing the research for the film, being in Chinatown and looking at what everyone was wearing, it's so creative. Like the things that you see that people put together, and you know, they're not necessarily trying to go for specifically for fashion, but there's so much creativity and brilliant styling that really even just specifically like grandmothers, you know, older women in Chinatown wear, and they look amazing. And it is it's inspiring in a fashion way.
I know, it's kind of like acknowledging or just recognizing that like subtlety can be really cool. And like what someone thinks like wearing sneakers is like old, but like they look great doing it, right? It's the person that's wearing
it. There's a real sense, like there's a lot of joy in the clothing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on and talking with me here and having a little lunch.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything that any advice you give to aspiring costume designers who may be watching this? Or
I think especially considering the time we're in, where there's a lot of uncertainty and everyone's waiting to sort of restabilize and give respect to the moment that we're in, make sure that we're all being safe. So it's just not a business as usual moment. And I know some productions are starting to come back, and but I'd say, you know, outside of the practical aspect of like, how do you get your first job and like, what's the work, you know, that'll come and change as work comes and goes. But I think for the actual process of costume design, the thing that I think has been so helpful is just paying attention and like listening and looking around and trying to absorb as much as you can about people and about different people, and to have, you know, a sense of compassion and empathy and be aware of people and references and different things that are happening, because all of the information that you can kind of retain and learn will help you when someone's trying to discuss with you a character and they're trying to figure it out. You'll be able to have the conversation. Right. So I would say just keep paying attention, and that'll help you eventually some way.
Yeah. Some way it will.
I think so.
Yeah. Aubrey, thank you. You're very creative and well-spoken, and I appreciate you coming on here and all the work that you do. So
thanks,
excited to see more come from you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you later.